Hello, everybody. I am David, the Minimal DM, and once again, I am going to be having a look at what the internet claims to be the top 10 pain points for new or inexperienced DMs, and see whether or not I can give you some hints, tricks, and tips on how to get around them. Now, before we get into the meat of it, let's address that rather provocative thumbnail. Yes, DMs are losers, and I do mean that in the nicest possible way. It's our job. Your adventurers, your players, they are the ones that win. DMs simply put the opposition or the adventure in front of them, and it is up to your players to overcome it. We constantly lose. It's our job. If you can remember that and keep your role just in the back of your mind, it is going to help you mentally in dealing with an awful lot of the things that we are going to come across on this list, especially the one that we're talking about today. Now, this one is not number 2 on the list, it's actually slightly further down, but I have jumped to it because it does follow on from the first video I posted. Link is just up there if you want to catch up on that one. And we are talking about what happens essentially when your players go off script. Last time we talked about DMs essentially over preparing things, and then suddenly your characters throw you a curveball and you've got to can everything that you've done and you start getting frustrated, etc. etc. Now, by and large, I do believe that your player characters should be allowed to do whatever they want with their characters because they are playing their characters' lives and they have free will. And if that means that they decide to go off course from what you have prepared, accept the defeat with grace. That is probably the number one rule. Don't get frustrated. You cannot possibly account for absolutely everything. And it does go back to the stuff of not over preparing, because there is always the distinct possibility that your characters are going to go off on a tangent. There is that old phrase about no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, in this case your players being the enemy. When that kind of thing does happen, there are ways to handle it, but first remember, you are the loser. Accept that defeat with good grace. Now, before I get into the bulk of it and dealing with the general situations where things go off kilter, I am going to address a couple of edge cases. The first one being a big bugbear of mine. Sometimes a module or adventure will call for enforced imprisonment. Now, I hate that. Curse of the Azure Bonds is one of the famous ones. There was an adventure, I believe it was called Starfall, that I ran for Star Wars the role-playing game, and that starts off with the rebels, your players, being locked up in a jail cell in an Imperial Star Destroyer with all of their equipment gone. I have, in the past, actually just left games where DMs have been really heavy-handed and tried to enforce incarceration on quite high-level characters, because they are the ones realistically where it's going to be very, very difficult to actually capture and imprison them. And of course, DMs have the ability to go rocks fall, everybody dies, but that is taking the choice away from your characters. And when I was confronted with this as playing in character, I managed to evade capture a number of times so that the odds were insurmountable, and simply walked away, because that is what any sane, normal person would do. And the DM wasn't happy about it, but they realistically hadn't left any choice. Now, when I ran Starfall, before we actually started the session, I approached it head on. I apologized. I said, look, guys, this is not the way I would normally run an adventure. I do not believe in incarcerating PCs without them having any kind of say in the matter. However, that is the way that this adventure is written, so that is going to be our starting point. I do apologize. Please go with it. It's a cracking adventure. Essentially, the whole idea of this module is a prison escape. And they were fine with that. Another adventure I ran, this was D&D, and I can't remember the name of the adventure, but it was a modified solo play adventure, and the party had just recently formed. We had new players who were just getting used to the game system, and so I chose this specifically so that it would give them an idea of how the game ran and how to interact with other players and get used to the mechanics and things like that. Now, we did have a very, very experienced player joining us as well, an experienced DM in and of his own right. And because of the way the adventure was set, because it was solo play, each encounter ran linear and moved on to the next. They started off being captured by giant birds and deposited at the top of a mountain. So there you go, straight away. There's your incarceration that the players can do nothing about, and then very prescriptive ways of moving on from one encounter to the next. It had to be for solo play, because at the end of the day, with solo play, you don't have a DM there that can cover for things if you go off track. One of the things that the experienced player tried to do was use climbing ropes and basically go straight down the mountain rather than follow the path. And I did try and deal with it in game, and he got a little bit frustrated and said, look, if it's a case where I've got to stay on the path, then just tell me. And I said, yeah, that is the case. It's for new players. I'm doing it basically just so that they can get used to the mechanics before allowing them far more free rein. And he went, sweet, no problem, just tell me. So, the moral of those two stories is approach it head on, be upfront with your players. If there is something in there that you believe that they're not going to like, whether or not it is a particular topic or not allowing them full free rein within the adventure, then approach it head on, explain the situation to them. They have always got the choice of, skipping this adventure and joining later on if they really hate it. But most people, being reasonable, will accept what you say and will just go with the flow because, hey, at the end of the day, they want to have a game. And especially in that second case where you had experienced players playing alongside inexperienced players, they were more than happy to go along with that because this was for the benefit of the new guys and everybody's there to learn and enjoy themselves and play. Now let's deal with probably the bulk of the cases that you're going to come across. We'll start off with essentially the characters refusing an adventure. So you have spent all week and you have this absolutely glorious multi-level dungeon all sorted out, and you approach the players with this job offer to go and clear it, and they go, nah. Sorry, we've just come back off an adventure. We've got all of this loot. We want to re-equip. We want to spend the next 7 days just getting absolutely blind drunk. And you know what? On the way in, we saw a bank. We think we're going to rob the bank and then skedaddle out of town. So sorry, no, we're not doing that adventure. Accept it with good grace. Yes, you can try and wheedle them. Yes, you can apply pressure. Yes, you can try and lead them into the adventure in other ways. But if they are absolutely steadfast in not doing it, then accept the loss. At the end of the day, while yes, it may be frustrating because you've spent all of that time just recently preparing all of this stuff for them, that preparation isn't lost. A couple of weeks down the track, they've travelled somewhere else. Plonk the dungeon there. How do they know that geographically it's not supposed to be there? Because they never went to it in the first place. So your preparation has not been wasted. It has simply been delayed. Now, as for this grand plan that they've got of going and robbing a bank, for me, my players know far better than to give me a lead in like that because they know for a fact that I will wing it and it will be memorable and nasty. However, that is a topic for another video, the ability to wing it. At some stage, I will say that you are going to have to pull on your big girl or boy pants and just go with the flow and wing it to keep the game going. And some of those sessions can be absolutely brilliant. However, that is in and of itself an art form. We will cover that later on. At this point, you do have a couple of choices. If you do not feel comfortable winging it, then stop the game at that point, come out of character, and address them DM to players. Give them a choice. Look, guys, I have this stuff pre-prepared for tonight. I do not feel confident winging it. Be honest with them. If you want to adventure tonight, this is the one, your choice. If you really feel that you do not want to do this, then unfortunately, we're going to have to stop it there. Let's play something else. That is always an option. Is it an option that I would go for each and every time? No. Eventually, as I say, you are going to need to go with the flow and learn to start winging it a little bit. But there are times to do that, and an awful lot of that comes down to your personal confidence. Like I say, we'll deal with that later on. Give your players that choice. In fact, let them know, hey guys, you guys discuss it amongst yourselves, because at the end of the day, this is your free time as well. I'll step out of the room. You guys talk about it, come to a decision, come and grab me, let me know what you want to do. And if they decide to play something else, sweet. If they decide to go on the adventure, carry on. Most importantly for you, the DM, use that time out of the room to mentally reset yourself. Act with good grace when you're leaving, or explain the situation to them. Go out of the room, take a couple of deep breaths, get over your frustration. When they come and get back to you with whatever decision they have made, accept that with good grace. Leave your frustration outside of the room if they decide that they want to play something else. And if by doing what you have in the way that you've approached it, they come back and say, look, okay, yeah, fair enough, we will go on with this adventure module. There are going to be some grumpy people in there that didn't particularly want to. Again, don't be all smug and I got my own way. Again, act with good grace. Yeah, sweet. Thanks for letting me know. Let's carry on. Don't allow things to devolve into an argument in the gaming area. Or if there is going to be an argument, step away from it, so that at the end, when you are called back into the room, you can act as an arbitrator rather than actually being in there and involved in it. Because at the end of the day, the DM's job is being the arbitrator of disagreements, whether or not it's rules or playstyles or things like that. It's all part and parcel of being a DM. Now, there is one very important thing that I feel I should touch on, and that is whether or not these course changes are constantly being fueled by the same player, essentially the ringleader. I'm not going to call them troublemaker. In any particular party, there is likely to be one, possibly two, and there are ways and means of dealing with that kind of thing. However, do be on the lookout for it, and if they are constantly taking things off course, deal with it outside of the game. I will touch on that in a separate video further down the track, and that is setting game expectations and what is now called a session zero. That was it. We never had session zeros back in the day. I've never needed one. However, it is a more modern thing, and yes, I will be addressing that. It's all to do with house rules and setting player expectations and that sort of thing. If it turns out that you have one player who is the constant disruptor in getting things off course, and look, I will be perfectly honest, I am probably guilty of that as a player, and I will think outside of the box, and some DMs have difficulty coping with that kind of thing. It's not meant in a nasty, malicious way. It is simply, I've come up with an idea and I think this will get around the problem. If you have one player that is constantly doing this, it does need to be addressed. Now, it is one of the reasons why, certainly in 2nd edition, an awful lot of DMs will not allow chaotic evil characters, because chaotic evil is basically licensed to be an arse. They can get away with it because that is essentially their character makeup. If you are playing alignment and that is not the character's alignment as being a constant disruptor, then remind them of that. Ask them to play in character. They won't necessarily like it, But too bad, that is the choice that they made. If you find that you have that kind of disruptive element at your gaming table, then you do need to be on the lookout for it and address it quickly, because what is going to tend to happen is that this person that is constantly getting their own way is going to be the one that sticks around, and all of the decent players, all of the friendly ones, all of the cooperative ones, they're going to go play elsewhere. And the person that constantly gets their own way is going to be the one that's enjoying themselves, and you as a DM are going to be miserable, and the other players that stick around are going to be miserable as well. So be on the lookout for that. I will give you some hints, tips and tricks on how to deal with that kind of person. Anyway, we will leave it at that for this one. Hopefully I haven't rambled on too long. Hopefully you've got something out of this video. There are going to be more in this series. I will set up a playlist for it. If this is your first time here, pop over to the channel, look for the playlist. It is going to be the top 10 pain points for new and inexperienced DMs. We'll go through the whole lot. That is about it from me. Please, if you have enjoyed this content, do that social media stuff. Leave comments down below, hit the like, subscribe, get notifications on when new content is coming out, and have yourselves some good gaming sessions. I will see you in the very near future. Toodle pip for now.